They say silence can be comforting, but out here in the woods, silence has teeth. It bites into you. It gnaws at your bones until even the smallest sound, a snapping twig, a gust against the cabin, feels like an intruder. For years, I'd lived inside that silence, choosing it over people, over the chaos and heartbreak I'd left behind. I thought I had grown used to it. I thought I preferred it. But on one bitter winter night, silence gave way to something else. A knock. Sharp, urgent, and impossible to ignore. I froze with my hand halfway to the firewood I'd been stacking. Out here, miles from the nearest town, no one just wandered to my door. Visitors didn't come this far unless they were lost, desperate, or dangerous. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined it, just the creaking of logs in the wind. But then it came again. Louder, faster, a knock that begged and demanded at the same time. My instincts told me to stay quiet, to keep the door bolted. I had spent years building this life of solitude, pushing people out, convincing myself that isolation meant safety. But my curiosity won. Slowly, I moved to the door, every step echoing against the wooden floorboards. I pulled it open, and that's when I saw them. A woman stood on my porch, her arms wrapped around 3 children huddled close against her. Their cheeks were red from the cold, their lips trembling, their eyes wide with exhaustion. Snowflakes clung to their hair and coats, glittering like shards of ice. The woman's voice shook as she spoke. Please. We don't know where else to go. Our car broke down the road. The engine won't start. We've been walking for hours. Her words tumbled out between breaths, but I barely heard them. My eyes locked on hers, gray, sharp, filled with something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite hope either. It was desperation. I should have turned them away. That was the first thought that entered my mind. Out here, resources were tight. My food stores were measured to last me through the winter. My firewood was chopped with only myself in mind. Adding 4 strangers to the mix was reckless, maybe even dangerous. And yet, as I looked at those kids shivering against their mother's coat, I felt something stir in me, something I thought I'd buried long ago. Come inside, I heard myself say, though my voice was rough, unused to kindness. The relief in her face was immediate. She ushered the children through the doorway, their small boots dripping snow onto the floor. My cabin, usually so still and empty, suddenly felt alive with their presence. The little girl, maybe 6 or 7, stretched her fingers toward the fire as if it were the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. The 2 boys clung to her side, their shoulders sagging with exhaustion. The woman, she introduced herself as Clara, thanked me over and over. I just nodded, not sure what to say. My cabin wasn't much. Just 4 walls of rough-hewn logs, a wood stove, a small table, and a single bed I'd built myself. It had always been enough for me. But with 4 new souls inside, it felt impossibly small. As I watched Clara settle her children onto the rug, I noticed her hands shaking. Not just from the cold, this was something deeper, fear, weariness, a lifetime of carrying too much. She pulled her coat tighter and gave me a cautious smile, like she didn't know if she had stepped into safety or into danger. I wanted to ask questions. Where was her husband? Why was she out here in the middle of nowhere? What was she running from? But I didn't. I wasn't ready to let curiosity chip away at the walls I had built around my own past. Instead, I busied myself with boiling water for tea, my mind racing. The children's laughter, soft and tentative, filled the cabin as their fingers thawed. And yet, underneath it all, I felt the tension humming. Something about Clara's story didn't add up. No one ends up stranded this deep in the woods by accident. She hadn't just stumbled here. She had been driven here by something bigger, something she wasn't saying. I glanced at her again, catching her eyes before she quickly looked away. There it was, the flicker of a secret, of a burden she carried alone. I knew that look because I'd worn it myself for years. That night, as the storm outside thickened and the cabin walls groaned against the wind, I realized my life of silence was over. I had opened the door, and with it, I had opened something else. A story was unfolding in front of me. I didn't know if it would bring me salvation or ruin, but one thing was certain: nothing in my life would ever be the same again. The fire burned low that night. its glow stretching shadows across the cabin walls. Clara sat at the table while her children slept, curled together like kittens on the rug. For a long while, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the storm clawing at the roof. Finally, she cleared her throat. "I owe you the truth," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the steam rising from the mug in her hands. "You deserve to know why we're here." Her voice trembled, but there was steel in it too, the kind of strength that comes only after everything else has been stripped away. I leaned back, arms crossed, waiting. I'd lived long enough to know when someone was carrying more than they could bear. She told me about her husband, how he had been her high school sweetheart, how they built a life together, and how that life unraveled the moment sickness took him. One day he was mowing the yard, healthy as ever, she whispered. The next, I was planning a funeral. Her knuckles whitened around the mug. I didn't press her with questions. I knew grief when I heard it, but she wasn't finished. After he was gone, I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. The bills came first, then the notices. Then the looks from neighbors, the pity, the whispers. Her gray eyes lifted to meet mine. I couldn't stay there. Everywhere I turned, I saw him, and everywhere else, I saw reminders of what I couldn't give my children anymore. She swallowed hard, her voice breaking. So I packed what we had left and drove. I didn't have a plan, just a direction, a way. Her words filled the cabin with a weight heavier than the storm outside. I understood more than she knew. Years ago, I too had lost someone, though the details were mine to keep buried. That loss had driven me into the woods, away from people, away from life. And now fate had brought this woman and her children to my door. Still, something didn't sit right. "You didn't just happen on my cabin," I said finally. "This road doesn't lead anywhere." Clara hesitated. For a moment, I thought she might deny it, but then her shoulders slumped. I was running low on gas. I turned onto this road hoping to find a station or something. When the car broke down, I thought we'd freeze out there. "If I hadn't seen the smoke from your chimney..." Her voice trailed off. I should have felt relief at her explanation. Instead, unease settled in my chest. I'd lived in these woods long enough to know that chance had sharp edges. People didn't just stumble into lives they were meant to change. The storm eased by morning, leaving behind a world wrapped in white. The children woke first, their laughter bouncing off the log walls as they pressed their noses against the frosted window. They were so full of life it hurt to watch. Clara moved slowly, exhaustion heavy in her every step. "You've already done too much," she said as I set more wood on the fire. "We'll leave as soon as the car starts." Her words struck deeper than I expected. Leave. The thought of the cabin emptying again, of the silence swallowing me whole, made my chest ache in a way I didn't want to name. Still, I only nodded. "You'll need food for the road," I muttered, turning toward the pantry. But when I looked back, I caught something in her expression. Fear. Quick, fleeting, but unmistakable. Not fear of me. Fear of what waited beyond these woods. I decided not to ask, not yet. But the question burned inside me. What was Clara really running from? That afternoon, I went out to check her car. The hood was iced over, the engine dead cold. It would take parts I didn't have, tools I hadn't used in years. Clara stood a few feet away, wringing her hands, her breath fogging the air. "Can it be fixed?" she asked. "Not without help from town?" I said. Her lips tightened, and she glanced back toward the cabin where her children's laughter still rang. "Then we'll stay until it is." The words should have been simple, temporary. But as she spoke them, a knot twisted tighter in my chest. Because I could see it, the way her eyes darted, the way her voice caught. She wasn't ready to go. Maybe she couldn't. That night, after the children had fallen asleep again, Clara stood by the window staring out into the dark. I joined her, the silence stretching between us. Finally, she whispered, "Do you ever feel like the world is chasing you, even when you stop running?" Her question startled me. I studied her face, lit faintly by moonlight. She wasn't just a widow grieving her husband. She was a woman hunted by debt, by fear, by something she hadn't yet told me, and for the first time in years, I felt the old instincts stirring. To protect, to fight. to stand against whatever shadows threatened someone else's light. But deep down, I wondered if letting her in had invited danger to my door. The days that followed should have been simple, me helping Clara keep her kids warm and fed until her car could be fixed. But nothing about their presence felt simple. Every morning, I'd wake to the sound of children's laughter echoing through the cabin. It should have filled me with peace. Instead, it unsettled me. I hadn't heard that kind of sound in years, and it stirred memories I'd worked hard to bury. Memories of another family, one I had lost. Clara tried to make herself useful, cooking meals with the little we had, keeping the children from tearing the cabin apart with their boundless energy. She carried herself with quiet determination, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her smile faltered when she thought no one noticed. One evening, while splitting wood outside, I spotted Clara pacing near the tree line. Her arms were wrapped tightly around herself, her face pale against the cold. I couldn't hear her words, but I realized she was whispering, praying, pleading, maybe both. And then, as quickly as she'd come, she hurried back inside, her expression smoothed over like nothing had happened. That's when the questions began gnawing at me. What was she hiding? And why did she look over her shoulder as though something or someone might appear from the shadows at any moment? I didn't have to wait long for an answer. The next morning, while chopping more wood, I noticed tire tracks on the road near where her car had broken down. Fresh tracks, too deep to be left by her old vehicle. Out here, visitors were rare. A hunter maybe, or someone passing through, but my gut told me otherwise. When I came back, Clara was kneeling by the fire, brushing the youngest boy's hair back from his forehead. She looked up at me, her eyes flickering with something like guilt, before she quickly turned away. I wanted to confront her, but the boy's smile stopped me. Whatever Clara was hiding, it was tied to those children, and pressing her might break the fragile peace we'd built. That night, after the kids had fallen asleep, I finally asked, "Clara, are you running from more than just grief?" She froze. The flames crackled between us, shadows dancing across her face. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, with a trembling sigh, she whispered, "Yes." Her confession hung heavy in the air. She stared into the fire, her voice quiet. When my husband died, people came after what little we had. Creditors, collectors, men who didn't care that I was alone with 3 children. They wanted everything. I paid what I could, but it was never enough. And when I couldn't pay anymore, they made sure I knew what would happen if I stayed. Her words chilled me more than the winter air. "Threats?" I asked. She nodded, tears catching in the firelight. At first, I thought they were just words. But then one of them followed me home at night. The kids were inside, and I knew I couldn't risk it. That's when I left. Anger flared inside me, not at her, but at the faceless men who had driven her to this point. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to promise her safety. Promises were dangerous things, and I wasn't sure I could keep one. But even as my heart hardened against those men, another thought crept in. What if they were still looking? What if those fresh tire tracks meant they had already found her trail? Clara must have sensed my worry because she reached across the table, her hand brushing mine. Her touch was light, but it carried weight. "I didn't mean to bring this to your door. I thought if I kept moving, they'd give up. I never wanted to endanger you." I met her gaze, and in her eyes, I saw both fear and something else. Trust. She had carried this burden alone for so long, and now she was placing it, at least in part, in my hands. The tension between us grew thicker with each passing day. The children had no idea, their laughter masking the dread that simmered beneath the surface. But at night, when the storm winds howled and the trees groaned, Clara and I would sit in silence, each of us listening for a sound we didn't want to hear. A car engine, a heavy knock, footsteps in the snow. One evening, as I walked the perimeter of the cabin, I found something half buried near the road, a cigarette butt still fresh. I didn't smoke. Neither did Clara. My pulse quickened. Someone had been watching. I didn't tell Clara, not yet. I couldn't bear to see that fear deepen in her eyes. But as I lay awake that night, the weight of her secret pressed harder against me. This wasn't just a family seeking shelter from the cold. This was a family being hunted, and whether I wanted it or not, I was part of their story now. The forest had always been my shield. Out here, the trees' muffled sound, the snow buried tracks, and the isolation gave me peace. But now, every creak of the branches, every crunch of ice outside the cabin walls set my nerves on edge. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. For days, I kept what I'd found, the cigarette butt, the fresh tire tracks, to myself. I told myself it was better not to scare Clara, better not to stir panic when the children's laughter was the only thing keeping this cabin from feeling like a prison. But secrets fester, and mine was no exception. It was late one night when the truth finally clawed its way out. I woke to the sound of footsteps outside. Not the timid scurry of an animal. Heavier, slower, deliberate. My heart slammed in my chest. I grabbed the old hunting rifle I kept near the bed and crept to the window. Through the frost-glazed glass, I saw nothing but shadows. The trees swayed, snowflakes swirled. Then, faint but clear, came the glow of a cigarette ember flaring in the dark. Someone was there, watching. I stormed outside, rifle raised, but by the time I reached the edge of the tree line, the glow was gone. Only silence remained. When I came back, Clara was standing by the door, pale, her children still asleep behind her. She took one look at me, at the rifle in my hands, and whispered, "They've found us, haven't they?" I should have lied. I should have told her it was nothing. But I couldn't. "Yes," I said. "Someone's out there." Her knees buckled, and I caught her before she fell. "We can't stay," she gasped. "If they've tracked us this far, they won't stop until—" She broke off, her eyes darting to where the children slept. Until what? I pressed, my voice harsher than I intended. She met my eyes then, tears streaking her cheeks. "Until they take the children, the air left my lungs." "What do you mean, take them?" Clara's voice cracked as she explained. Her husband had left behind debts, yes, but worse than that, he had borrowed from the wrong kind of men. Men who didn't just demand money, they demanded collateral. When she couldn't pay, they threatened to claim her children as repayment, to use them in ways she couldn't even bring herself to say out loud. That was why she had run, why she had driven until her car gave out, why she had ended up here. The realization hit me like a blow. This wasn't about debt collectors or idle threats. This was about predators, monsters in human skin, who wouldn't rest until they got what they wanted. And now they were circling my cabin. Clara clutched my arm, her nails digging into my sleeve. I should leave. I should go back and face them. Maybe if they take me, they'll let the children live. Her words sliced through me. I grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at me. "You can't think like that." "They won't stop with you." "You know it," she broke then, collapsing against me, sobs shaking her body. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. For years, I'd believed solitude was my only refuge, that if I kept to myself, I couldn't be hurt again. But Clara and her children had cracked open the walls I'd built, and now I knew I couldn't turn away. I wouldn't. The turning point wasn't just realizing the danger. It was realizing I cared. That these strangers had become something more, something I couldn't walk away from, even if it cost me everything. The following day, I began preparations. I reinforced the door, checked the locks, laid snares in the snow around the cabin. I hadn't been a fighter in years, but survival has a way of waking old instincts. Clara watched me silently, her face pale but determined. That night, as the children slept, I sat by the fire with her. The weight of what she'd confessed lingered between us. Finally, she whispered, "Why are you helping us?" "You owe us nothing. You don't even know us." I stared into the flames, memories of my own past flickering in their glow, my wife, my daughter, both taken from me in a single accident I'd never forgiven myself for. I hadn't been able to save them. But maybe, just maybe, I could save Clara and her children. Because, I said quietly, someone once knocked on my door too, and I didn't answer. I won't make that mistake again. She reached for my hand, her grip warm and trembling. Neither of us spoke after that. We didn't need to. The silence between us said enough. But as I lay awake later listening to the storm outside, I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Whoever was watching us would return. And next time they wouldn't stay in the shadows. The knock that had once brought Clara and her children into my life had changed everything. But the next knock at my door could very well be the one that destroyed it. The night it happened was colder than any before, the kind of cold that bites through walls and sinks into bone. Clara had tucked the children in, whispering lullabies that wavered with unease. I sat near the window, rifle across my lap, staring into the dark woods. Every creak of the cabin felt like a warning, every gust of wind like a whisper. They're coming. And then they did. Headlights cut through the trees, blinding against the snow. An engine rumbled closer until a black truck stopped at the edge of the clearing. My grip tightened on the rifle. Clara appeared beside me, her hand clutching my sleeve. Her face drained of color. Two men stepped out. Heavy boots, cigarettes glowing in the dark. They didn't rush. They didn't have to. Predators move slow when they're sure of the kill. Stay with the children, I told Clara, though my voice shook. I opened the cabin door and stepped outside. The snow crunched under my boots as I raised the rifle, keeping it steady even though my heart hammered against my ribs. "Evening," one of the men drawled, his breath fogging in the cold. "We're looking for a woman. Name's Clara, widow, got 3 kids. His grin spread wide, ugly. "Pretty sure you've seen her." I didn't answer. The second man, taller, meaner-looking, stepped forward. "Now don't make this difficult. Hand her over and we'll be on our way." The wind howled through the trees, carrying Clara's muffled sob from inside. That sound anchored me. I thought of my own family, the ones I hadn't been able to save, and rage lit a fire in my chest. "She's not yours to take," I growled. The taller man chuckled. "Everyone belongs to somebody. Debt don't just vanish, old man. We collect what's owed. One way or another." My finger tightened on the trigger. "Then you'll have to collect from me." The moment snapped. The shorter man lunged, reaching inside his coat. I fired. The rifle roared, echoing through the woods. Snow exploded at his feet, close enough to send him stumbling back. I hadn't aimed to kill, not yet, but the message was clear. "Next one won't miss," I said, my voice steady now. For a long, tense moment, the two men glared at me. I braced myself, ready for the end. Then the taller one spat into the snow. "This ain't over." They backed toward the truck, muttering curses, eyes promising they'd return. When their headlights finally disappeared, the silence left behind was deafening. I lowered the rifle, my hands trembling so violently I almost dropped it. My breath came in ragged gasps. The snow around me seemed brighter, sharper, as if the world itself had been holding its breath. Inside, Clara stood frozen near the children, tears streaming down her face. When I stepped back into the cabin, she rushed to me, her hands gripping my coat. "You could have been killed," she whispered, her voice raw. I wanted to tell her it didn't matter, that if it came down to my life or hers, I had already made the choice. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I just pulled her close, feeling her shake against me. The children stirred in their sleep, oblivious to how close they'd come to losing everything. Looking at them, a heavy truth settled over me. This wasn't finished. I'd scared the men off for now, but fear only delays monsters. They would return. And next time, they'd come ready for blood. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the fire with the rifle in my lap, staring at the flames until my eyes burned. Clara sat across from me, her face pale and hollow. "We can't stay here," she finally said. "They'll never stop hunting us." I shook my head. "If you run, they'll follow. If you hide, they'll find you. The only way this ends is if we stand and fight." Her lips trembled. "You'd risk your life for us? For me?" "You don't even know me." I met her gaze, and for once I didn't look away. "I know enough. I know you're a mother protecting her children, and I know what it feels like to lose a family. I won't let it happen again." The weight of my words hung between us, heavy with meaning neither of us dared to name. As dawn broke, pale and cold, Clara slipped her hand into mine. Her grip was fragile yet strong. A silent vow passed between us. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. But deep down, I knew the fight had only just begun. The knock that had brought Clara and her children into my life had turned into a battle for survival. And though I'd chosen to stand with them, I couldn't ignore the question gnawing at me. What price would we all pay for this stand? The men didn't come back that next night or the one after, but the weight of their threat hung in the air like smoke that wouldn't clear. Every sound outside set my nerves on edge. Every creak of the trees sounded like boots on snow. Clara tried to carry on as though nothing had changed, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She tucked the children in earlier, lingered at the window longer, and clutched the edge of her shawl as though it were armor. I knew then what I had to do. At dawn, I saddled the old horse and loaded my rifle. Clara stood in the doorway, worry etched deep into her face. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice low, afraid the children might overhear. "To finish this," I said. She stepped forward, grabbing my arm. "No. If you go to them, you'll never come back. They'll kill you." I looked at her hand on me, her fingers trembling, her grip desperate. And I thought of the way she had stood in my doorway weeks ago, a mother begging for shelter. I had let her in then. Now I had to keep her safe. "I lost my family once because I didn't act soon enough," I said quietly. "I won't make that mistake again. Not with you. Not with them." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue further. She just let her hand fall away. The ride into town was long and bitter. The snow was deep, the wind sharp. But inside, I burned hotter than I had in years. When I reached the settlement, I found the sheriff, a man I rarely bothered with. He raised a brow when I told him everything. Clara's past, the men who claimed her, the threats at my door. "Those brothers have been trouble a long time," the sheriff muttered, spitting into the dirt. "But no one's had the grit to stand up to 'em. Until you." With a few good men behind him, the sheriff rode out that afternoon. I led them to where the brothers holed up, a shack near the river. The confrontation was swift and brutal, but this time, it wasn't just me standing alone with a rifle. The law was there. The weight of justice was there. And when it was over, the brothers were hauled away in chains, their smirks gone, their threats silenced. When I returned to the cabin that night, Clara was waiting on the porch. The children peeked out from behind her skirt, their eyes wide with fear and hope. When I dismounted, Clara ran to me, her relief breaking like a storm. "You came back," she whispered, pressing her forehead against my chest. "I told you I would," I said, and for the first time in years, I believed my own words. The weeks that followed were quiet. The woods went back to being what they had always been, vast, lonely, and strangely comforting. But inside the cabin, everything had changed. Laughter returned. Clara hummed while she worked, the children chased each other across the floor, and the silence I'd once clung to now felt like an old habit I didn't miss. One evening, after the children had gone to sleep, Clara sat across from me by the fire. Her face was soft in the glow, her eyes steady. "You gave us more than shelter," she said. "You gave us a chance to live without fear. I don't know how to repay that." I shook my head. "You already have. You gave me something I thought I'd never have again." Her hand found mine, warm and certain. We didn't speak after that. We didn't need to. The fire crackled. The woods sighed outside, and for once, my heart was still. Looking back now, I realized the knock at my door that night wasn't chance. It was a test. A widow and her 3 children came to me carrying their fear, their loss, and their hope. And in choosing to protect them, I found a part of myself I thought had died long ago. The woods had made me a ghost, a man surviving on memory. But Clara and her children turned me back into something else, something living, breathing, needed. If there's a lesson in it, it's this: family isn't just the blood you're born with. Sometimes it's the people who stumble onto your doorstep when you least expect it, carrying all their burdens, asking for a place to rest. Sometimes, if you're brave enough to open the door, they don't just enter your home, they enter your heart. And once they're inside, you realize you were never meant to be alone at all.